Basically, this is the Transforming Data Infrastructure call. So it's a call by the ESRC. I'll say a little bit more about that call in a moment. And our project in particular then was focusing on unlocking the potential of the voluntary community social enterprise sector as a way of trying to develop and feed into a transformational data infrastructure. I'll say a little bit more about what that means in a moment and what that might entail. Just a little bit of context then about the observatory, where we've come from and how it's led into this project, taking just a bit of a course of some of the work that we've done. There you see a little bit of a timeline and some of the work that we've been doing as well. So back before COVID, we did the evaluation of the 50 plus volunteering programme, which was funded by DCMS, and amongst a variety of things, gave us a real insight into the data and the sort of really interesting sort of set of projects that were on that programme that DCMS ran, trying to understand over 50s volunteering and what that might entail. And we did sort of a bit of an evidence review, around all of that. And then this project really, or some of the ideas for this really emerged from a project that we did funded by the ESRC, so that's the Economic and Social Research Council, that we did in conjunction with Sheffield Hallam University, Tracy Cool when she was there, and with various colleagues at NCVO as well, looking at the impact of COVID on the voluntary sector. And I see, I think Jürgen's on this call as well. I know you had another project at that same sort of time, funded by the ESRC as well. So there was quite a lot of activity going on in that space. Coming out of that, we ran our barometer, which we ran at that stage every month. We did lots of interviews. Some of you, I think we maybe even interviewed on that project. We had 300 in-depth interviews of really understanding what was going on there. We also did a panel survey. But really coming out of that project was a real appetite and a need for better understanding of data and the voluntary sector. And I know Pro Bono wrote a report talking about data poverty and the voluntary sector, and the way in which the voluntary sector might be able to increase its capacity in that space. So coming out of that, we launched the observatory, which is housed at NTU, but we really want to collaborate with different people in different places. We've changed our barometer from something that was monthly to quarterly, and I know a number of you on this call help us collaborate around that, help shape our questions. So we're just doing the 9th wave now, so very keen if one of my colleagues maybe could put the link in the chat for that. Always very keen to promote and push that out. We've done some evaluation work with some local infrastructure organisations, and we're running a knowledge transfer partnership with a charity called SJOG as well, on sort of impact measurement and around the UN Sustainable Development Goals. We're doing a project with Strathclyde, looking at measuring the contribution of the sector as part of the ONS, so the Office for National Statistics, and how we could better measure that. And that all feeds into this project, the Transforming Data Collections Infrastructure project that I want to talk about today, and just give you a little bit of background for that. So basically, as I say, I think a data infrastructure is to help researchers, and I think we've defined social science researchers in a very broad way. So that obviously includes academics, and I can see a number of people on this call that are academics, which is great, but also a wide range of other sort of researchers as well. So people who work in voluntary organisations, who work in policy organisations or others. And an infrastructure, a data infrastructure, is to collect, manage, house, look after, do all the information data governance and things like that, to make that data available for others. What they were really after then is a new collections, one or many, of data that helps fill gaps in current provision. So understanding what sort of things are available, what could be accessible and useful. How to help researchers discover, access, and make the most out of that data. So it's also not just about housing it somewhere, but making it available and useful as well. It needs to improve the landscape of research, so make more effective use of research. So instead of going and surveying people on an individual project, the fact that it could be reused reduces the burden on organisations, increases the utility for researchers as well, and improves the lot for everybody. It's the sort of idea. It's about improving capability, so improving provision as well. And ultimately, what the ESRC are looking for then are some project ideas that they can put forward. And there's a link there if anybody's interested, which would be what they call an infrastructure fund. So something in excess of, they're saying, about £10 million for an initial period of funding for 5 years. So effectively, they're looking for a single or a range of ideas across the projects that we are part of to see whether there are some needs in this area, and then to what that would take to invest in, initially for 5 years. But I think sustainability is one of those core principles that we want to work for as well. There's no point in having something just last 5 years. What happens then as well? So they're really interested in that. So hopefully that begins to make some sense of what a data infrastructure is, but more than happy if anybody's got any questions either now or later, then please raise your hand or ask any questions as we go along. So what we've been talking about then in this project is the voluntary community and social enterprise sector collects lots of information about a wide variety of groups, people, just through its everyday activities. So it does things like evaluations, it monitors things, it runs surveys, it does its own research as well. Been talking to people who run, for instance, helplines, and they collect lots of information and insights through that. As you'll know, most projects, when they get funded, they have to have monitoring forms, they have evaluation exercises and things like that as well. There's lots of insights built into those. Organisations have case notes that they capture and various other things as well as surveys. For instance, local infrastructure organisations run state of the sector surveys as an example. And one of our partners is the British Red Cross. They do some research as well. But we believe that has lots of very useful insights, bits of information, but there's challenges. It's often unstructured or structured in different ways. So take this example of state of the sector surveys. Whilst there's lots of them and they contain individually structured information, people tend to ask slightly different questions at different times, making it difficult to compare. And it's very difficult to access lots of that information as well. So organisations, sometimes we've done a bit of digging on this. Some local infrastructure organisations are great and they've published their reports. Sometimes they even publish their question sets, but often they do this. It doesn't even make the public realm, or their websites change for various reasons, and then the data and even the reports are not available anymore as well. Obviously, things like evaluation and monitoring, those things go to funders, but again, they're sort of difficult to access from a research point of view. So the funding that we've got is to explore the possibilities of unlocking this information and making it accessible for research purposes, and try to understand what does that entail. How can we do that? What are the sort of things? So we're basically doing a feasibility of this, looking at what could be done, and understanding that. So to create a data infrastructure that answers a broad range of questions over time and fulfills various different disciplines as well. So we're not just thinking of a data infrastructure that helps understand the voluntary community social enterprise sector alone, although that definitely is important, but it might answer a wider range of questions as well. When we put in the proposal, then we linked some of this to the so currently the ESRC have got a set of strategic themes that runs until the end of this calendar year. So these are the themes. And we believe, or we made the argument, that the voluntary community social enterprise sector cuts across many of these different themes. And to pull this out, we use, as the best available evidence at this stage, the NCVO's almanac, and sort of match the organisations to those types. And you can see there's thousands of organisations often cut across these topics, and these are registered charities in England and Wales. So, if we took Scotland and Northern Ireland, but we also took community organisations and others as well, there's a lot of things going on in that space. So our argument is that the voluntary community social enterprise sector works across many of the different areas that researchers who encompass the ESRC work around as well. So we, just to give you a little bit of a flavour of what we've been doing then, we have set up the project. We're going to be launching a website. We've got stakeholder events such as today. Work package 2 is effectively asking a range of different researchers what their needs are. So thank you, those of you that participated in that. We've sort of got 3 broad camps, but researchers who research the voluntary sector, so I know some of you on the call very much in that camp, researchers who might be interested in the voluntary sector and work with the sector, and those researchers who might not even work with the sector at all, but might find some of the insights and information that it captures useful and meaningful for their research. Work package 3 is really trying to map what type of data, insights, information does the voluntary sector capture as part of its ongoing activities? How is that structured and organised, etc.? Work package 4 is to develop up some prototypes. So we're going to test out some things and explore what happens. But right at the centre of this is questions around ethics, information governance, data sharing. What would it take to make an data infrastructure work well over time, and developing those things? What we've got to produce at the end of this then is effectively a feasibility study report that goes to the ESRC that is published at the end of October. That's something that they may take up and say, yes, they want to support that and back it for a bigger data infrastructure, or it might be they're also very keen that potentially other people might pick up on that report and maybe even take elements of what we are recommending in that and develop other ideas and proposals as well. So very much this is a public report, and we would like to make this as useful and beneficial for the voluntary sector as possible as well. It's going to be a fairly short report. I think it's only 20 pages, so it's going to be very tight what we include in this. So we're going to have to be quite rigorous in what we capture, but there will be room for appendices and things as well. But we are also trying to work out, in your organisations and in your settings, are there other benefits that we can have for this report or other things for the project that we're doing as well? We want to make this as useful as possible. We're working out. So we're working with DataKind UK, that I'm sure many of you on this call will know, to do a lot of work around this. The British Red Cross, because they've got a very good data analytics team, and Strathclyde University, because they've got a really good, strong economics team, and we're working with them for this project with the Office for National Statistics as well. So when we're talking about this, then, just to give you some examples of some of the types of data collection that we thought are interesting examples. So, as an example, every project, or virtually every funded project that you will have been involved in, has got some sort of evaluation or monitoring thing going on within it. Often there's lots of quite detailed monitoring and insight forms. Often there's an evaluation at the end saying what worked well, what didn't work well. Lots of insights hidden within those things. But our sense is that really, once those things are done, they often are sent off to the funder but what happens next? I ran, when I did my PhD, a very small therapeutic arts organisation, very tiny, but we had to do an evaluation. I remember right at the end of doing that project, the funding manager said to me, "Well, you need to do an evaluation form." So, and write an evaluation report. I said, "Well, what happens if I don't do it?" She said, "Well, you won't get the final funding." I was like, "Okay, I need to do that, so I'll get the final payment. What will you do with it afterwards?" She went, "Nothing. It might sit on a shelf, but probably not very much." We're really interested to see whether some of the insights within evaluation and monitoring forms could be utilised for research purposes. Another example is helpline data. So we know during COVID, the British Red Cross, Citizens Advice Bureau, and others were reporting, I think every week to government, some of the insights that they were getting from their helpline data. We're working with a modern day slavery charity right now that they have a helpline, and they take the insights from that and they present that information to the police and to the border force and various other things as well. There's a lot of real time needs hidden within that helpline data. So we're interested in that sort of thing as well. We are talking to an organisation, the third one here. So we're talking to an organisation that runs a volunteering booking platform. And effectively, in a sense, what they've got within that is real-time data about people's volunteering patterns. They have profiles of those volunteers. They know that they are capturing that information. Can they unlock that for research purposes? Maybe for those of us interested in volunteering research, that tells us quite a lot about micro-volunteering, changing volunteering patterns, and various other things like that as well. So what are the possibilities within that? We're working with a charity called SJOG. Sia Kriti, who's working on that project, is on the call, looking at their ESGs and the UN Sustainable Development Goals and capturing all of the data that they've gotten, trying to find ways of measuring their impact. So that's another area that potentially lots of charities and voluntary organisations are capturing. The voluntary sector itself does its own research. So the British Red Cross, who are partnering with us, do lots of research on communities, on resilience, on issues around floods, many other things like that. But can the data from that be made more available for research purposes as well? And then, surveys. Obviously, we within the observatory run the barometer, but we're aware there are many other surveys going on all the time across the sector as well. Are there ways that we can unlock the insights of that and make that more available? Would an infrastructure help support that as well? We've built this around some core principles then, trying to make this as co-designed as possible. Central principle really for me is that this needs to be reciprocal rather than extractive. Too often I think academic researchers come, we extract data and we leave. What ways can a data infrastructure help support the voluntary community social enterprise sector rather than just support researchers as well? So I think that's a really key thing that's coming out over and over again of what a data infrastructure would need to be able to do. It needs to be seen as valuable for research and for the sector as well, is absolutely central as one of the findings that's coming out very, very strongly if people are to participate in this. We are exploring, rather than trying to get voluntary organisations to do new things, a lot of our emphasis has been trying to work on what are the existing activities that VCSE organisations engage in, and how can that be unlocked and improved? So we improve the data standards as we go through this as well. We've been trying to work about how does this become more sustainable as a model. So even if it was lucky enough to go forward and to have that bigger investment for 5 years, what happens then? Can this become a sustainable model? But actually, can the value go back to voluntary organisations from their data as well? And I'll say a little bit more about that. And we're really interested in trying to understand what was needed for data infrastructure. We also want to learn what's happened before. This is not happening in a vacuum. There is a lot of other things. And I know some of the people, again, on this call are involved in some of these projects. So not only we want to recognise, learn from, and actually see to what extent a data infrastructure might be able to support some of the existing initiatives. So, many of you will know, I think Alistair's on this call, the excellent data spine they've got at the University of Birmingham, and other places. So really interesting project. Can a data infrastructure help support the development of that? MPC have been looking at a local needs data bank, so that's a really interesting one. Many others as well that's there. So that's just a list of some of them. Again, if you know of other projects, you think, oh, that relates to it. We're not saying this is all totally unique. In fact, we're actually saying there's a lot of this already going on, and bringing that together and understanding those existing initiatives, what works well, what doesn't, what are the challenges, is a really important part of any feasibility study and something that we want to be looking at as well. So these are some examples of what sort of things that we were thinking about, trying to extract some of the data and insights using large language multimodal models and various other things like that. There's a lot of emerging approaches using some quite advanced AI that could be utilized as well, that perhaps is more available now than it was before. So we've looked a bit at some of the literature that already exists. We've found, I think, that are really some key principles that for data collaboration to work, having a shared purpose amongst all the partners is really, really key. We've also found that the literature says, and our data is really speaking to this as well, that absolutely this is about relationships, the centre of all of these types of collaborations, when they work well and when they don't. Lots of conversations, again, in our wider research, but drawn from the literature around strong information governance structures and how you create shared data culture is really important as well. Developing up data quality, data standards is really important as well. But it takes time to improve the time and the capacity as well. So there are some of the findings from the literature. Really, one of the big things that's coming out as well is just thinking about the types of information that the voluntary community social enterprise sector collects and how it could be used in terms of data. Just the huge range, wealth, and depth of that information that could be translated into data for research purposes is really important. The voluntary sector, as I'm sure you'll all know, there's been a long tradition of arguments within the academic literature saying that it's very good at connecting with, sometimes people used to say hard to reach communities. I think increasingly people are saying things like under-researched communities, and really connecting with those people that are not normally part of research. Maybe there's more trusting relationships there. So that is something, but also taking a trauma-informed approach as well. So as an example, this modern day slavery charity that we've been talking to, rather than a researcher going and asking them again about some of those traumatic experiences, that is not trauma informed if they've already given those insights to somebody else. So trying to work in that more trauma informed way and capturing the information only once, but maybe making it available under the right conditions to different people is really important. The sector is also, very, particularly on a micro level, really grounded and connected with specific places and specific communities as well. So giving, again, from an academic point of view, real insights into a wide range of different communities. And a sense of coming out over and over again about reducing the burden of communities who often feel over-researched, underheard and exploited as well. So to what extent can a data infrastructure help address some of those challenges? These are some of the key themes that we've found so far then. A big theme is coming out is actually about helping and understanding how to value the data that the voluntary sector can and could produce. We found some really interesting examples of some charities who are beginning to actually understand the financial as well as the the importance of that data for their mission. There's a Scottish charity we've been talking to a bit, who have put they're an environmental charity. They are putting that data on their profit and loss account, helping them invest in it, finding ways to monetize that data as well, and extracting value and insights from that data is helping them achieve their mission. And it's also simultaneously helping them get some income as well. So that's a really interesting idea. Big thing, and I'm sure many of you will know debates in the sector around this for a long time about data standards as well, and what role could a data infrastructure have in trying to help shape and harmonize some of the data collection attempts that are made. A real sense as well about using it to improve the data quality that's in the sector. So whilst the sector has a lot of opportunities for collecting data, there's also significant challenges sometimes about the quality and the quantity of the data, the capabilities and capacity in the sector. Obviously, it's an area that often doesn't get as invested in as it could be. So what's the opportunities for capturing that in that way? Could a data infrastructure help support the capacity of data collection there? Information governance is absolutely central to this. The ethics, the data sharing, the sort of information agreements, the governance of that, the way in which different data sets, if they're brought together, how do they get managed, is absolutely central. We found some really good examples in the NHS and others around that sort of stuff as well. Making it reciprocal rather than extractive is really important. But really, data fragmentation and not data poverty is a central thing. And building relationships and trust is absolutely vital to this. And then I'll just wrap up by saying some of the things we want to be doing. So we're going to do a bit of a deep dive around volunteering, because we know that's a really key area. That's something that is explored. We know the sector is very interested in that, and that's obviously an area. So we're working. We've got hopefully an event in May that we'll be able to announce fairly soon around that. We're going to do a workshop around seeing data as an asset and taking some of the learning from different sectors as well and understanding that. We're proposing to do an unconference to bring people together around these things. So we really want to make some spaces for people to connect. We're going to do some prototyping. And then in about September, we're going to do another stakeholder workshop with what we're finding, testing out our findings, and then have a final report as well. So I'm going to stop sharing because I've talked for far, far too long.